I just realized I didn't start the stream, so I apologize for the online people. Luckily for you, I did not go too much in depth into my Dharma talk. I just went over the definition of Buddha and Bodhisattva and their places in Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. So I won't go over it, I'm sorry again. But I will move on to the next set of questions that we received about Bodhisattvas. So I think the next section you were asking about who are these Bodhisattvas, right? So in our shrine we have a couple of Bodhisattvas. So in our new shrine, it'll pretty much look the same. The only difference is on the right side here, we have Bodhidharma, which is the patriarch of Zen Buddhism. So in our new shrine, it's actually going to be Kshitigarbha, which is our Bodhisattva over here. He'll be moved on that side, and then we're going to put Avalokiteshvara on the other side in our new shrine. But here, we have Bodhidharma, so he's a patriarch. We will have a patriarch altar in our new shrine in the back room. Anyway, I won't go over that. But you've listed a few bodhisattvas. You have a couple of key ones missing, but I'll mention some of the major ones. So in Mahayana, we have a few major bodhisattvas. We have Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Manjushri Bodhisattva, Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Mahasamapatra, or Great Strength Bodhisattva, Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva, and Maitreya Bodhisattva. Those are the major bodhisattvas in the Mahayana. So Avalokiteshvara is a celestial bodhisattva, so they're not a real person, but their representation is very much real, right? So Avalokiteshvara is a bodhisattva who hears the cries of the world. That's the translation of the name. And he, she, there's no gender, they're genderless, but in Chinese and Vietnamese traditions, they show her as a female. So the statue right out front here and then the big white one out there, they're female representations of Avalokiteshvara. But in Japan, Korea, and Tibet, they represent as a male. But either way, it doesn't matter because the Avalokiteshvara, if we read the Lotus Sutra, chapter 25 is dedicated to Avalokiteshvara. And it portrays that Avalokiteshvara can come to anybody in different forms, right? So they list about 32 different forms. So if you need someone, right, depending on what you're needing in life, depending on who you are comfortable with, who you're comfortable talking to or understanding from or being taught from, Avalokiteshvara would come to you in that form, right? So if you're more comfortable speaking to an older man, then an older man would come into your life somehow to help you. Or if you need someone younger or someone that's in a certain position or a certain lifestyle, whatever it may be, right, that person would show up and help you. I think we probably have all experienced some point of our life where we just had that one person kind of randomly show up and you're like, you kind of showed up in a really good time and place, right? It was kind of almost like a coincidence. So that's pretty much the idea of revolving of Avalokiteshvara and why we would pray to him, her. So they are the Bodhisattva of Great Compassion. So the Great Compassion mantra that we would read, the longer one in the book, is dedicated to Avalokiteshvara. It's mentioned in the Karuna Dharini Sutra, which is a sutra dedicated to Avalokiteshvara, and that's when he exclaimed that mantra. And then another mantra that's represented to Avalokiteshvara or compassion is a 6-syllable mantra, the Om Mani Padme Hum, which is also pretty well known and famous. Okay, I'm going to stop because I can just go on and on and on. So the next bodhisattva is not mentioned here, but it's the Great Strength Bodhisattva or Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva. Him, her is typically with a trinity. So it's Avalokiteshvara, Mahasamaprapta, and then Amitabha Buddha, right? They create the trinity of the Pure Land tradition. And great strength, I'm just going to say great strength because Mahasamaprapta is a tongue twister. So great strength Bodhisattva is one of the oldest Bodhisattvas in the tradition. So him, her, along with Avalokiteshvara and Amitabha, they're all celestial beings, or celestial Buddhas or Bodhisattvas. I just call them aliens, because essentially that's what, if you read the sutras and you read the teachings, right, these are Bodhisattvas that have been experienced or seen or felt in a meditative state high meditative state of consciousness, right? So I like to believe that in those higher states of consciousness where they, kind of transport themselves into different realms or heavens or what do you want to call them, is basically just kind of going to a different world. I like to think of it, right? So that's why I just call them aliens, because the universe is vast, right? It's statistically impossible not to have other beings or creatures out there, right? If we were to see this whole room as an entire universe, right, and if you just put a thread of string from this side to that side, that is only the amount of observable space we've been able to see out there, right? So with that small amount, we have not found anything yet, but you still have like 99.99999% of the other universe. So they're just out there somewhere. So that's my belief. And the next major bodhisattva is Manjushri Bodhisattva, or the Bodhisattva of Great Wisdom. In some temples, you'll see either the Buddha with Avalokiteshvara and Earth-Store Bodhisattva Kshitigarbha on the side, or you'll see the Buddha with Manjushri and Samantabhadra on the side, right? Manjushri and Samantabhadra are it depends on what you read. So some sutras will describe them as celestial Buddhas, but some sutras describe them as physical people, right, in the assembly of the Buddha at the time. So I don't think there's been a full declaration of whether they're here or not, but that's beside the point. It doesn't really matter. Whether they're real or not, what they represent, what they teach, and what we learn from them is still very important. So Manjushri Bodhisattva is known for his high wisdom. So he penetrated the teaching of emptiness, which is the highest teaching in Buddhism, right? So we see him dedicated in many different sutras, or at least mentioned in many different sutras. But we call upon him, or we bring him to mind because of his great wisdom. So we kind of want to also emulate that within ourselves, right? So, but wisdom, right, is different from intelligence. Because intelligence, we can all be intelligent, we can all be book smart, but we may just be stupid and ignorant in other parts of things, right? So wisdom in Buddhism is the eradication of ignorance, greed, and anger, which are the three poisons, right? Our life is consumed around those three poisons. So wisdom is penetrating and basically rooting out those poisons, those three, the greed, ignorance, and anger. And once you're able to do that, you're able to see things as they truly are and penetrate the emptiness of things and then finally attain wisdom. Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, or the Bodhisattva of Great Conduct, or Universal Worthy Bodhisattva, is also a very important Bodhisattva. He's typically, if we see statues of him, he's typically on a 6-tusked white elephant. And then Manjushri is on a lion. They usually sit side by side. So on the Meditation Sutra of Samantabhadra, it's a pretty important sutra, but it gives you a detailed description and imagery of Samantabhadra and his magical elephant, basically, right? So Samantabhadra is foremost in meditation practices in the higher levels of meditative consciousness. And then that's what I'm looking for. what is a good word I'm looking for? Basically, conduct and practice, right? We typically like the my goodness, I'm having so many brain farts today. In the Aspiration of Samantabhadra Sutra, which we chant every once in a while, and then during like repentance ceremonies, we typically call upon Samantabhadra because we're trying to emulate his great conduct. So his conduct is pure practice. So his practice is pure. He's been able to eradicate all the defilements of the mind. He's been able to root out the 3 poisons. So we usually kind of imagine him in a way when we are doing repentance ceremonies, or just basically trying to, or during like the shorter repentance prayers, we call upon Samantabhadra. And in the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Buddha stated or told us that Samantabhadra made 10 great vows, which we usually chant when we were chanting the Aspiration Sutra. And those 10 great vows are to pay homage and respect all Buddhas, to praise the thus come ones, so basically all the saints and the Buddhas, to practice profoundly the giving of offerings, to repent misdeeds and negative karmas, to rejoice in others' merits and virtues, to request the Buddhas to continue teaching, to request the Buddhas to remain in the world, to always follow the Buddha's teachings, to benefit all living beings, and to transfer merit and virtues to benefit all beings. So there's a lot there that covers many different topics, but the gist of it is basically to practice diligently, to bring to mind the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas when we're practicing, right? So when we get to the part of invoking the Bodhisattvas' names, it gives us a short description of who they are and what they practice, right? So whether it's compassion or whether it's looking out for sentient beings and saving them, whether it's to practice diligently and to repent, right? These are characteristics we want to bring to mind so that when we are praying or we're doing something or we're practicing or meditating, we can bring those characteristics to mind and try to emulate that bodhisattva, right? So I think I mentioned this last time or a couple times ago that when we're praying, we're not praying to them necessarily, right? They're not here. They're not going to come and save you, right? If you can, we don't pray for health, wealth, and whatever else happiness, right? No one can give that to you. We have to do it ourselves. But our form of prayer is simply just it could be a statement of motivation or a statement of aspiration, right? Self-aspiration. Because when we're praying to Avalokiteshvara, for instance, right? The great compassion bodhisattva. And if we're in a time where maybe we're in a heated argument or we're seeing something that's frustrating or infuriating, right? We're bringing up emotions of anger or hate. We can, chant the name of Avalokiteshvara or, say a prayer to him, her. And when we do that, we're basically just trying to visualize and bring to mind the characteristics of Avalokiteshvara's compassion, right? He, she is there to listen to our cries. He, she is there to listen to what we have to say, right? So great listening is part of her characteristic, right? You have to listen. A great listener is, like our parents, right? Sometimes when we're younger, we go home and we're crying for something or something's upsetting. Our parents are basically our free psychologists, right? They're our shrinks when we're younger. So they have great listening, right? Because they want to listen to you. You have to vent out. The parents want to be able to understand what is upsetting you or what you're going through or what had happened so they can basically form a plan in their head to help you out. So Avalokiteshvara works in the same way. How do I get back to Avalokiteshvara from Samantabhadra? Who am I missing? Next is Kshitigarbha. Kshitigarbha, Earth Store Bodhisattva. Earth Store Bodhisattva is a celestial being, but they represent Kshitigarbha in the sutras had made a vow that between the time of the death of our historical Buddha Shakyamuni and by the arise of our next Buddha Maitreya, he has made a vow to save all sentient beings in all the evil realms, right? So in Buddhism, we believe in 6 realms of existence, not necessarily physical places, but mindsets. Mindsets, right? And the 3 lower realms are the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, or just the spirit realm, and the hell realm. So Kshetragarbha is mostly known for helping beings in the hell realms. So in most statues, he's depicted as a simple monk with shaved head, and he'll have a staff in one hand and a jewel in the other hand, right? So the staff represents many things. The staff in some of the sutras and the Great Vows of Kshetragarbha Sutra, the staff is represented that he's basically breaking the gates of hell and having the jewel as a light to help people be like, hey, I'm over here. This is the exit. But that's more symbolic. But the staff has been used for centuries because it has 6 rings on it, right? So the 6 rings represent the 6 realms of existence, and it kind of jingles when you're walking. So when a monk, sometimes you'll see in I think in the Mahayana traditions in Asia, a lot of the monks, when they go out for alms, right, and they're begging for food, the lead monk would have a staff that kind of jingles on the ground. And so when it jingles, it's basically trying to scare off all the little critters on the ground so that the monks and nuns don't accidentally step on the bugs, right? So they use the jingling of it to scare off so we don't kill any animals. Stop there because I can just go on and on and on. What book is this? This is book 1 of like 12 different books I have. This is Life of a Monk, just making notes and studying. I have a whole book on just the different bodhisattvas and Buddhas, and this is not it, but I do have notes here on the different ones. The Kshetragarbha is also pretty important. Kshetragarbha Sutra it's pretty long. It's pretty big. I don't have it here, but now in the morning services for the Vietnamese service, we're chanting the Kshetragarbha Sutra. And you would typically chant that for different reasons. Sometimes we chant it during funerals or for memorial services. Or it's chanted to kind of help. It's kind of like help bless the area, right? Which is what we're doing now. It's basically just try to be like, okay, we need some help here expediting the process because it's moving pretty slowly, right? But Kshetragarbha is a pretty important bodhisattva. Again, they're celestial, but their characteristics and representation is very important. That's something that we need to bring to mind. Because now, right, because since he is represented as helping all beings in hell, again, that could be a mindset, right? It's not a physical hell, but we all have days or times in our lives where everything's just hellish, right? Everything's difficult, it's hard, it's not going our way. And sometimes we see that in others, and sometimes, it's pretty obvious. Maybe it's not so obvious. People just kind of hold it in. But that's why we haven't done it this year, but a lot of temples and a lot of sanghas or communities help the poor, help the homeless, because they are in a hellish place, right? They're sleeping outside. Maybe they have not enough clothes. Maybe they have enough food or water, or what it may be, but they're in a place where they're just either terrified or they're hungry or thirsty or whatever it may be, right? So we used to go out, and usually in the beginning of the summer, all the way up until the winter time, at least once a month, we would go out and give water to the homeless, and we'd give them some clothes and stuff, because our nun used to own a thrift shop, right? So we'd give clothes out and give water, and then during the winter time we'd give jackets and blankets. But apparently we can't give water anymore because the police are like, you can't give out food and water. I'm like, I'm sorry. Are you just trying to kill everybody in the streets? So it's become a whole hassle now. So we haven't been able to do that for a while because we keep getting caught. We're trying to sneak around. But every time we do, we get caught. And so we get caught as long until we get a ticket or get a warning, right? And we're like, okay, fine, we'll leave. But we're pretty adamant usually when we're trying to help people. Next bodhisattva on your list here is Maitreya. So Maitreya Bodhisattva is the bodhisattva of the future. So in some of the sutras, he is called Ajita. He's one of the disciples of the Buddha's time, and the Buddha predicted that he would be the Buddha of the future. So in some traditions, there are three periods of the Dharma. So the first period, some schools have as 500 years, some have as 1,000 years. But that's where Buddhism and teachings flourish. It's most, right? And there's a middle time of 1,000 or 2,000 years where it's kind of dwindling down, and it's not practiced anymore. People are not really going for it. And then the third period is when Buddhism disappears, right? And after that third period is when a new Buddha would arise into the world and basically just renew the teachings. So depending on what tradition we're looking at for the time periods, we're either in the middle or the last part. So for the last part, I think we're in the middle part because it's still pretty flourishing in a way, right? It's not dying out so much. If anything, it's becoming more mainstream. I think that's a good thing. Sometimes not so much. So I believe we're in the middle period. But some, I think it's mostly the Japanese schools. I think we're in the final period, the last period. So they're basically just waiting for Maitreya. Like, no, not yet, they'll go. But Maitreya's name literally means the loving one in Sanskrit. And sometimes traditionally he's depicted sitting on a throne, because Maitreya when he comes back, he's going to be born into a royal family, and then he'll, like a historical Buddha, he'll leave his royal family and palace and all the luxuries of life, and go out and practice as an ascetic. So in Tibet, I think I'm mostly seen in Tibet, and some Chinese traditions, you'll see him on a throne. But in other places, like here, for instance, outside our big fat Buddha, has 5 kids on him. Has 5 little kids. So there's 2 fat Buddhas. So there's the fat Buddha we may see like at Chinese restaurants, whatever, right? The good luck Buddha. He's not really Buddha. He's just a fat Chinese man that's there for good luck. And then you'll see Maitreya Buddha, or Bodhisattva, like the large one we have outside. And typically the correct representation, you'll see him with 5 kids or 5, what else is he with? I forget what all other symbols, but he'll have 5 symbols of something with him. And the 5 symbols represent the 5 aggregates, or the 5 skandhas. Form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Those are the 5 aspects that create every human being, right? So, yeah. So some of the fat Buddhas are not, he's not the fat Buddha, he's just a fat Chinese man because he likes to eat. But truly, you'll see Maitreya either represented on a throne, like sitting on a throne, or as looking with like royalty garb, or the fat Buddha with 5 kids. They're not his kids, or maybe they are. I don't know. Let's see, who's next? So So you have Laughing Buddha. Laughing Buddha is the fat Buddha, the not Buddha. And then Ananda. So Ananda is an arhat. He's one of the main disciples of the Buddha. He was also the Buddha's attendant. He was also his cousin. Ananda is known for his photographic memory. So he was the one that recited all the Buddha's teachings after the Buddha passed away, right? So after the Buddha passed away, there was a council of monks that kind of got together, like, okay, let's systemize the teachings, right? And so they had to bring in Ananda because he had photographic memory, so he would recite all the sutras, and then all the monks, all the arhats, the enlightened ones, would verify the teachings to make sure they were correct. So in most sutras, the first sentence is, "Thus I have heard," right, or some form of that. And that's Ananda speaking, saying, "Thus I have heard." So he's saying, "I heard this from the Buddha," right? And then it'll describe who the audience is, where they're at, and who they are directing the teaching to. So Ananda is actually one of 16 main arhats. So there's 16 main arhats in Buddhism. There's Shariputra, Mahamudgalyana, Mahakashyapa, Mahakatyana, Mahakashutila, Rivata, Sulipantaka, Nanda, Ananda, Rahula, Gavampati, Vindola, Bharadvaja, Kaludayan, Mahakafina, Vakulan, Aniruddha. 16 arhats. I know that because it's in the Amitabha Sutra, which I chant every day, so I have it memorized. But there's 16 arhats in Shariputra, which is my next one on here. And Ananda is part of the 16 main disciples. So if we visit a very large temple, sometimes on the walkway towards the temple, they have statues of the 16 arhats on one side, and then statues of Buddhas on the other side. And these were his main highest disciples. And then Shariputra was one of the oldest disciples. Some accounts say he lived up to like 110 or 120, something like that. Regardless, he was still one of the oldest of monks in the assembly. And he was well known for his debating success. He was very good at debating. Because before he became a monk with the Buddha, he was a Brahmin, so he was practicing the Hinduism and the Vedas, right? And one of my favorite stories of his is when he was first conceived, right? So when he was still an infant or still in the womb, right? His mother would always argue with the brother, and the brother would always win. But when she got pregnant, she would always win the arguments. So the brother got really mad and set off to different places of India and learned logic and learned debate, and he learned all the Vedas of the Hinduism, and he became really good at debating. So when he came back and he asked his sister, "Where's your kid? Where's Shariputra?" And she said, "Oh, he already left the home life and now he's with the Buddha." So he was like, "Oh, no, I'm going to go get my nephew back." So when he went to the Buddha and he told the Buddha, I was like, "Hey, you have my nephew, like, I want it back." And the Buddha said, "You can have him, tell me why you want him, and if you win the debate, then I'll give him to you." And then the uncle was like, "Okay, so if I win, I take him back, but if I lose, I'll give you my head." So of course he was debating and he lost, so he ran away, right? So like half a mile down the road, the uncle stopped and was like, "No, I'm better than this. Like, I made a bet, I need to go back and fulfill my bet," right? So he went back to the Buddha and he asked the Buddha for a knife, and he was like, "Why do you need a knife?" He was like, "Well, I lost the bet, didn't I? So I'm going to give you my head." And he was like, "There's no such teaching in my dharma." So he told him, "Well, instead of leaving and giving me your head, why don't you join me instead?" So not only did he fail to bring Shariputra back home, but he failed himself to go back home. So he also became a monk. But Shariputra was one of the eldest and one of the wisest disciples. Him and Mahamudgalyana were the two main disciples of the Buddha. There was right and left hand, essentially. And I don't know what you mean by Lady Buddha.
So there's this Vietnamese statue in Vietnam. It's huge, and it's like a female Buddha.
It's probably Avalokiteshvara. There are female Buddhas, right? There's no discriminating between men and women. We all have the Buddha nature, right? Tathagata Garbha means Buddha nature. And we all have it, regardless of who or where you are. We have the ability to become Buddhas. Unfortunately, in some of the earlier sutras, there's like the Medicine Buddha Sutra, for instance. Doesn't necessarily say you can become a Buddha if you're male, but it's saying, because it kind of states like, hey, if you're a female, but if you want to be a male, do this or whatever, right? You can, if you're practicing and you get a level of attainment, you can descend. So if you get a level of attainment, of enlightenment, right? There's different levels of enlightenment. But if you get to a certain level of enlightenment, you can basically choose where you go in your next life, right? You can choose where you want to be born, who you want to be born into. So some of the teaching is saying, hey, if you do that, you can come back as a male and be easier for you to become enlightened. Different reasons. And even now, these days, we have discrimination, right? Women are still discriminated, or they're just not seen as important or whatever, right? There's still pay discrimination. There's still everything discriminating. But in the later sutras, like in the Lotus Sutra, one of the chapters mentions that an 8-year-old girl was on the verge to become a Buddha. She was about to become enlightened. And some of the monks were like, there's no way an 8-year-old girl, an 8-year-old and a girl can become a Buddha. So she's like, oh yeah, watch this. And she would do something, and she basically transformed herself into a man and just transformed herself into a Buddha. And it's like, hey, see, I told you I can do it. But the point there was, the point of the story the Buddha was trying to make is it doesn't matter if you're old, young, woman, man, or somewhere in between. You have the capability of becoming a Buddha, depending on what you do. He only argued that it's more difficult for females because, especially back then, right, females basically had no rights, right? You stayed home, you cooked, you cleaned, you buried me children, right? And it was like that until a couple hundred years ago. So the stories of the earlier sutras and the stories saying, you can come back as a man because it'll be easier for you. You'll have more respect. It'll be easier for you to let go of things and just be more accepted into the community. But now, of course, we don't see it that way. At least in Mahayana Buddhism, all the nuns have equal status, right? Like our nun here, she's the abbess of this temple. In Theravada Buddhism, on the other hand, not so much. Only because the nun lineage of bhikshunis means nun, the lineage of that kind of died out a while back ago. So traditionally, in order to become ordained, you have to have, for monks, you have to have 10 senior monks present to become ordained. And same way for the nuns, you have to have 10 monks and 10 nuns to become ordained. But since the nunhood kind of died out, they didn't have enough nuns to ordain more nuns. So they're basically like, you're SOL at this point. So, but nowadays, what nuns have been doing is they would leave the country, go to a country where they can get ordained as nuns, and then come back. But the problem there is that either the monks in Thailand may not see the legitimacy of their ordination because they weren't ordained in their tradition. So they may not recognize the ordination, their status as a nun, or they may not recognize the ordination, period, at all, right? But it's slowly coming back, not so much in Thailand. So typically people go to Sri Lanka to get ordained as nuns. but the nuns in Theravada are coming back. They're flourishing now, which is good. There's not so much in America, but in Australia, it's very dominant there. They have a lot of nunneries. I'm trying to think where else. Yeah. Otherwise, we can go to California, and then California is just hundreds of temples there, right? We have one of the bigger ones of Deer Park Monastery, which is Thich Nhat Hanh's temple. And he has a lot of monks and nuns there, American monks and nuns, but it's coming back. The lineage of nuns is finally coming back, which is good. Okay, I think I've covered all the major bodhisattvas. Right? I think I did. Any other questions? Oh yeah. So those are the Deva guardian bodhisattvas. There's another word for them. I think it's Vajrapani bodhisattvas. So there's two of them, right? One looks pretty inviting and handsome. The other one looks a little suspect and kind of devious. But the nicer one is essentially inviting in the good people, right? So they're inviting, if you're here to learn, if you're here to do good, be good, practice good, then the Deva Guardian Bodhisattva invites you in, and the other one basically scares off the bad people. Yeah, our new shrine will have giant ones. They're like 8 feet tall. So those are going to be pretty to look at. But a Deva Guardian Bodhisattva usually, even now, you can call somebody a Deva Guardian Bodhisattva if they are someone, like back in the day, some of the wealthy merchants or donors or royalty or whatever, right? People who kind of donated land or built the temples or built memorial shrines or whatever, they helped maintain and help the Buddhism grow, right? So we can call them Deva Guardian Bodhisattvas. So they're guardians of the dharma. They're guardians of the teachings. So even now, right? If you are doing something to help protect the dharma, to help portray it correctly, to help practice it correctly, and to help maintain it, then we can be also Deva Guardian Bodhisattvas. But yeah, they're typically either represented like right at the door, either outside, mostly because a lot of the bigger shrines, when you enter the building, there's like a kind of a hallway, and that's where they would be placed. But we don't have that big of an area, so they're going to be inside the actual shrine on the two corners. Yeah. They have bodhisattvas. They have names. I don't know their names. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Cool. I think I answered all your questions, right? I'm trying to look at it. I'm like, I think I did. I go off topic so much, so that's why I kind of confuse myself. So yes, practice being a bodhisattva. Even though technically a bodhisattva is a person who has attained a level of enlightenment, but beyond that, it's just the characteristics of the bodhisattva, right? Like, what is the bodhisattva? And we can see, in Buddhism, we see you don't have to be a Buddhist to be a bodhisattva. So like for us, we think that Mother Teresa was a bodhisattva because she dedicated her life to help the poor, to build schools and hospitals, right? She did everything she did for the poor people, for the people. So, all the saints, Mother Teresa, anybody else that kind of does good for the world to benefit people can technically be called a bodhisattva. So that's why we try to aspire to dedicate our lives to become bodhisattvas as well. You don't have to make vows or take precepts or anything to become a bodhisattva, but the precepts are there, the vows are there to essentially just help and remind you of what you're doing, whatever you're doing for, right? Because the precepts are not rules, they're guidelines to help you become a better person. Like the 5 precepts, for instance, they're common sense. They're don't kill, don't steal, don't commit sexual misconduct, don't lie, and don't take intoxicants or something that's going to craze you, basically, right? So they're not like things that are unattainable, right? They're just like, duh, don't kill, right? Because it's not going to get you, it's going to get you thrown in jail. And don't lie, because it's just going to lead to more lying. It could lead to steal. It can lead to everything else. I'm trying to think of a story. There's a story of a monk who was going to town, right? And he was thirsty, so he found a house. He banged on the door, asking for water. He was thirsty, but no one was there. So he walked around and he saw a jug, and this jug was filled with something, and the jug was filled with alcohol. So it was wine, beer, whatever it was, right? He was like, well, there's nothing else to drink, so I'm just going to drink this. So he drank it and became drunk, right? So after he was drunk, he saw chicken, and he was like, I'm hungry, so he killed the chicken and he ate it. And then some woman walked down and she's like, hey, what happened to my chicken? Did you take my chicken? He was like, no, I did not take her chicken. So, and then he was like, oh, but you're pretty. And then he ended up, and so that happened. So by just drinking, right, taking intoxicants, you've killed, you've lied, you've stolen the chicken, you've committed sexual misconduct. So they all tie into each other, right? So that's why we try to abstain from drinking or taking drugs, because there's no such thing as too little or too much, right? I mean, okay, maybe there's too little and too much, but the point is, we see so many fatalities just by, drinking and driving, or, overdosing, right? Sometimes you can't control it. And with drinking, you take 1 or 2 drinks, and you're like, I'm good, I'm feeling good, and you just want to take more because you want to feel the same way. But it could end up killing, lying, raping, and doing everything else just by that one action, right? So that's why the 5 precepts are very important to uphold, right? No one's going to prosecute you spiritually for breaking a precept, but they're there to help you be like, okay, I've taken these vows for a reason, right? They're not just empty words. If they were just empty words, then there's no point in taking the vows. But you take the vows, you take the precepts, because you're essentially is promising yourself that you're trying to avoid these things, right? Because by avoiding doing those things, you will help you become a better person, help you become a happier person, right? We also believe in moderation. So, sometimes there's a misconception when you take the precepts of the 5 precepts, no killing means to become a vegetarian, right? Which is not true necessarily. Some people choose to be a vegetarian, right? But when we say no killing, it's the intention behind the killing. So it's as long as you don't have no intention to kill, right? Your intention is not malicious. It's not bad, right? You don't say, I'm going to go out and intentionally kill everything that I see, right? So as long as you don't have that mindset, then you're practicing no killing. But we do killing almost on a daily basis, right? Unintentionally. you can, when you're walking outside, you may step onto bugs, ants, or whatever, right? You don't, because they're so small and you're not really paying attention to the ground, you're going to accidentally kill those bugs. And when we're driving the car, all these bugs that splatter into the windshield, right, by accident. Sometimes birds, right? I've had a couple birds like slam into my windshield. Even when we're cooking or brushing our teeth, right, we're killing germs, which are still sentient beings in a way. So we do a lot of things that are unintentional. So we may accumulate some bad karma from it, but it won't be as heavy of a negative karma, as if we were intentionally to kill something. The teacher, every time we do like a precept ceremony, he'll emphasize that it's in moderation. So if you do choose to drink in moderation, right? If you do choose eat meat in moderation, right? The only exception here is when you take the Bodhisattva vows. Our tradition, one of the vows is explicitly saying, I vow to be a vegetarian, right? So at that point, then you have to commit. You commit to it. But prior to that, you can eat, but try to consume less, right? The meat industry is a supply and demand operation, right? So if you go to a grocery store, if you're buying it, right, you're requesting the supply, so like, okay, supply's down, so now they have to demand more slaughtering, and they have to bring it to the store, right? So it's not necessarily don't eat meat, just don't eat as much of it, right? Because too much is not good for you. A little bit is, you need the protein, you need some of the essential vitamins and all that come from meat, right? So it's okay to eat it. Just don't eat too much of it, because too much of it, again, is also unhealthy for you. I think one of my reply to my emails before was, before I became a monk, and before I took Bodhisattva vows, or maybe even during it, I don't remember, but I called myself a Buddhist vegetarian. So whenever I cooked my own food or had the ability to control what I eat, I would eat just vegetarian, right? If I were to go out or go to someone's house and they offered meat or whatever, right, because they're offering it to you, I would accept it and just eat it. So in controllable situations, you can control what you're eating. I guess you can say, you can give advance warning, hey, I'm a vegetarian, and they can modify their menu or whatever, but essentially if you're offered the food, you can eat it. Because even the Buddha himself was never vegetarian. He survived on what people gave him when he went out for alms. So he's begging for food, so he can't be like, I'm sorry, is there meat in this, right? And say no. He didn't do that. He didn't discriminate between the poor, the healthy, or the rich and the poor, or the type of food he got. He simply said, I'm here for food. Whatever you have to spare, I'll take it. So he got fish, he got pork, he got every animal they ate at the time in his food. So he never said explicitly, don't become a vegetarian. There's very few sutras later on during the Mahayana tradition and development where it does say specifically to be vegetarian. But that's during the Mahayana time, because most Mahayana temples, the monks and nuns don't go out and beg for food. They have their own kitchen, so they are able to control what they eat. So it's easier for them to become vegetarians. But the only thing here is the Buddha explicitly said, you can eat meat as long as the meat wasn't killed specifically for you. So as long as you didn't tell somebody to go kill an animal for you, or gave them the notion or intention to kill it for you, then it's okay. He also did mention a list of different animals, specific animals to not eat meat from. I don't remember the full list, but it included like dogs, snakes, I think wolves, and some other. There was a list. There was a list of like 6 or 7 different animals that he said, hey, don't eat this. How do I get to this topic. Okay, so I'll stop there. No final questions, comments, emotional outbursts. Okay, so we'll transfer the mirror and then we'll go into chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. So we'll just go to our general chants. Body, speech, and mind in perfect oneness, I send my heart along with the sound of the bell. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. Listen. This wonderful sound brings me back to my true home. In gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and time. May it be fragrant, earth herself, reflecting our careful efforts, our wholehearted mindfulness, the fruit of understanding slowly ripening. May we and all beings be companions, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home. The incense in the censer now is burning, all the dharma realm in every place auspicious, clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilled, as all Buddhas now show their perfect body. Homage to the incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and Great Bodhisattva. Homage to the eternally and the sagely Sangha in the Dharma realm and the realms of empty space and 3 periods of time. Homage to the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha, Maitreya, honored future Buddha, Manjushri, great wisdom and Bodhisattvas, universal great conduct Bodhisattva, all dharma, Deva Bodhisattvas and the magic mountain assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Om Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate bliss, Avalokiteshvara, great compassion, Bodhisattva, great strength, Bodhisattva, earth sword, great vow, Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure sea like Bodhisattva. The Great Compassion Mantra with 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes around you runs like this. Namo Ratnatrayaya, Namo Harya Avalokitesvaraya, Bodhisattvaya, Mahasattvaya, Mahakarunikaya, Om Savalavati, Sodanastasya, Namaskritva Namanarya, Avalokitesvaralantava, Namo Nilakanta, Shri Mahapatashami, Sarvadata Shubham, Ashiyom, Sarvasattva Namo Pasava Namo Bhagamavatetu, Tadyatha Om Avalokalokati Karati Hishiri Mahabodhisattva Sabo Sabo Mara Mara Mashi Mashi Ridayo Goro Goro Gamyan Doro Doro Bashati Mahabashati Dara Dara Dirini Shvaraya Jara Jara Mahabamara Modhilehi Ahi Shina Shina Alashin Balashari Vashabasnin Varashaya Horo Horo Pra Horo Horo Shri Sara Sara Siri Siri Soro Soro Bodhaya 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 Maitreya Nilakanta Trisharana Vayamane Swaha Sitaya Swaha Mahasitaya Swaha Sitaya Ye Shvaraya Swaha Nilakanti Swaha Pranila Hashisamahokaya Swaha Sarva Mahahastaya Swaha Chakra Hastaya Swaha Padma Keshaya Swaha Nilakantim Pantalaya Swaha Shankaraya Swaha Namo Ratnatrayaya Namo Harya Avalokite Shavaraya Swaha Hom Siryanto Mandrabataya Swaha. The Dharma body is bringing morning light in concentration. My heart is at peace, a half smile is born on my lips. This is a new day and I vow to go through it in mindfulness. The sun of wisdom has shining in every direction. Noble Sangha, diligently bring your mind into meditation. Namo Shakyamonaye Bodhaya Namo Shakyamonaye Bodhaya Namo Shakyamonaye Bodhaya. The one who bows and the one who is bowed to are both by nature empty. Therefore the communication between them is inexpressibly perfect. Our practice center is the net of Indra reflecting Buddhas everywhere, as my own person reflects in all Buddhas, to whom with my whole life I go for refuge. Offering light in the 10 directions, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, to whom we bow in gratitude. Teaching and living the way of awareness in the very midst of suffering and confusion. Shakyamuni Buddha, the awakened one, to whom we bow in gratitude. Cutting through ignorance, awakening our hearts and our minds. Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of great understanding, to whom we bow in gratitude. Working mindfully, working joyfully for the sake of all beings. Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva of great action, to whom we bow in gratitude. Responding to suffering, serving beings in countless ways. Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of great compassion, to whom we bow in gratitude. Seed of awakening and loving kindness in children, sprouts, and all beings. Maitreya, the Buddha to be born, to whom we bow in gratitude. Showing the way fearlessly and compassionately, the stream of all our ancestral teachers, to whom we bow in gratitude. The Dharma is deep and lovely. We now have a chance to see it and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. The Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the deep course of perfect understanding, shed light on the 5 skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-beingness and Shariput is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore in emptiness there is neither form nor feelings, no person, mental formations nor consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue nor body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realms of elements, no interdependent origins prajna paramita should therefore be proclaimed. Gate gate para samgate bodhiswaha gate gate para samgate bodhiswaha gate para samgate bodhiswaha. We invoke your name, Avalokiteshvara. We aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffering in the world. You know how to listen in order to understand. We invoke your name in order to practice listening. Our attention and open-heartedness, we will sit and listen without any prejudice. We will sit and listen without judging or reacting. We will sit and listen in order to understand. We will sit and listen so attentively that we will be able to hear what the other person is saying and also what is being left unsaid. Know that just by listening deeply, we already alleviate a great deal of pain and suffering in the other person. We invoke your name, Manjushri. We aspire to learn your way, which is to be still and to look deeply into the heart of things and into the hearts of people. We will look with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will look with unprejudiced eyes. We will judging or reacting. We will look deeply so that we will be able to see and understand the roots of suffering through the impermanent and selfless nature of all that is. We will practice your way of using the sword of understanding, cut through the bonds of suffering, thus freeing ourselves and other species. We invoke your name, Samantabhadra. We aspire to practice your vow to act with the eyes and heart of compassion, to bring joy to one person in the morning and to ease the pain of one person in the afternoon. We know that the happiness of others own happiness, and we aspire to practice joy on the path of service. We know that every word, every look, every action, and every smile can bring happiness to us. We know that if we practice wholeheartedly, we ourselves may become an inexhaustible source of peace and joy for our loved ones and for all species. We invoke your name, Shittigarva. We aspire to learn your way of being present where there is darkness, suffering, oppression, and despair, so we can bring light, hope, relief, and liberation to those places we are determined not to forget about. Abandon those in desperate situations. We will do our best to establish contact with those who cannot find a way out of their suffering, those whose cries for help, justice, equality, human rights are not being heard. We know that help can be found in many places on earth. We will do our best not to contribute to creating more hells on earth and to help transform hells that already exist. We will practice in order to realize the qualities of perseverance and stability, so that like the earth we can always be supportive and faithful to those in need. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, way path of light and beauty, and world dwelling in the refuge of Dharma. I learned to open many doors on the path of transformation, dwelling in the refuge of shining light that supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Taking refuge in the Buddha, in myself I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. Myself I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking refuge in the Sangha. In myself I aspire to help all people build fourfold communities, to embrace all beings and support transformation. Reciting the sutras, practicing the way of awareness gives rise to benefits without limit. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guide and support along the path.